Our second lesson is from Psalm 1. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of waters that brings forth its fruit in its season, whose leaf shall not wither, and whatever he does shall prosper. The ungodly are not so, but they are like the chaff which the wind drives away, and therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. Amen. The third lesson is selections from two passages from the Arcana Celestia. One, 3192, and following very closely after 3194. In 3192, the words being explained are, "The servant took Rebekah and went away." In the story, we're talking about the marriage or the union between the Lord's divine rational good and the Lord's truth that will become divine rational truth. Taking Rebekah away signifies the divine natural good, and that this affected initiation. The case is this: truth out of the natural could not be elevated to the good in the rational except by means of divine truth and divine good. Both natural. Divine truth natural, which is called the man, must show the way and lead. Divine good natural, which is called the servant, must introduce and initiate. These two, so to speak, are comparatively like two wings that uplift. Divine good natural and divine truth natural. From the Arcana 3194, Isaac came from coming from Beer-lahai-roi. This signifies the Lord's divine good, rational, born of divine truth itself. I know a lot of these phrases can get us lost. There is divine good, and there is divine truth. These both reside in the natural, or can reside in the natural. Isaac was seen coming from Beer-lahai-roi, which signifies to be born of the divine truth. In the original, this word means the fountain of the living God who sees me and I live. The fountain of the living God who sees me and I live. Hagar was at this fountain when she believed that she would die and so would her son. And she lived, and she said, "I shall call this place Beer-lahai-roi." She called it the fountain Beer-lahai-roi because the fountain of the living God who had seen her, and she lived. There is divine good and divine truth, and these two are together, and from them comes the birth of the divine rational. The divine rational is born, the very essence of it being the Lord's divine good, and the existere of it, or the existence or manifestation, coming from the divine truth. These are what stands for Isaac coming from Beer-lahai-roi and also going into the sanctuary of truth, represented by the tent of Sarah, his mother. Amen. Psalm 1 ends with words many of us don't like to see. Blessed is the man who follows the Lord. That part is lovely in Psalm 1. The man shall be, or the person shall be, like a tree planted by rivers of waters. Leaf shall not wither. Times of drought he will prosper. Not so the wicked, but they shall be driven away like the chaff, like the external parts of the wheat that is not needed. We don't like to hear about the chaff. We don't like to hear about the wicked. We don't like to hear about things that remind us that not everything that we're doing is good, and not everything that we're thinking is true. But you know, there's only one way to get to doing what's good, feeling what's of the Lord with us, heavenly, and thinking what's true. And that is by receiving in our understanding the Word, understanding what it's saying, trying to apply it to our lives, and then shunning evil as sin. So we're told that the first of the church in us, the first dwelling place of the divine in us, comes by the shunning evils of ourselves, shunning evils as sins against the Lord. This is the first act of charity. The first act of charity is to shun evils as sins. Everything else that will come in our lives as we're trying to follow the Lord, as we're trying to be one of those blessed of the Lord that Psalm 1 speaks about, everything has to follow upon the first shunning of evils as sins against God. Otherwise, there's no foundation for anything good to really be planted in our lives. The Lord can't work in the soil that is ruined by all the falsities and evils that come as part of the package of being human. The Lord has to begin working in us by giving us instruction about how to change that soil or the ground or the earth of our natural lives and our spiritual lives. And by rooting out, as it were, the weeds or the things that are growing there that aren't from the Lord. Isaac and Rebekah. So many things in this story are connected with the culture of the times that we might get mixed up or lost in thinking, well, that makes sense, or that doesn't seem very good, or wait a second, really, that's what they did? But let's refresh our memories about this chapter 24. Abraham has been called out of his homeland years before this and is in a new land, the land of Canaan, surrounded by the nations that are worshiping idols. And he was told when he was back in his homeland, I will call you out of the land of your fathers to a new land, and I will create a covenant with you, and you shall become your descendants like the stars of the sky, like the sand on the sea. But you will follow me. And you will come into this new land. And I will establish a covenant with you, and I will create a great family, a nation. Nations shall come from you. Years pass, and Abraham is wondering, when's this going to happen? I'm a really old man. My wife's a really old woman. And we're going to have nations come from us? So how about we take Hagar, the young Egyptian servant, and I will build up a family by means of her. Not an unusual or strange thing in those times with those people. And so a child is born, Ishmael, the son of Hagar. After that has happened, the Lord appears to Abraham and says, well, now your wife's going to have a child, and you're going to be built up, a great nation will take place. And he goes, oh, that Ishmael may live forever? No, your wife, not your son by means of your servant. Your wife's going to have a child. And as we talked about last week and the week before, he just laughed. Sarah heard it and she just laughed. Isaac stands. His name means laughter. So we know in the internal sense we're following the development of the Lord's own mind and heart as it goes through the changes of turning from a child, a baby, a young boy, to the divine human, and the developments that are taking place in the Lord's heart and mind as he's receiving from within those things that are divine and receiving from without those developmental things that he's learning from the Word, he's learning from his parents, he's learning from the world, and he's picking them up and building up what we all build up. That is an ability to be a human being operating in the world. So Abraham now has Isaac. The sacrifice of Isaac was another strange story representing the Lord coming to a place in his life where all the things that he cherished, that he thought were really valuable, would be lost. But the Lord was said, I will provide for you. Abraham does not sacrifice his son Isaac. Isaac grows up, and now he's ready to get married. Abraham does not take a wife from the Canaanite land, not from the land of the idolaters, but he sends his servant back to the land of his family and asks that he find a wife from there. The servant is sworn to do what his master has said. Well, what if she won't come with me? Well, then you're relieved of your vow. So we picture this man with a lot of camels. It says he took 10 camels, a lot of silver, a lot of gold, a lot of presents to find a wife for his master's son. And so he's come into the land where he knows his master grew up, and he's looking for his master's family. And he comes to the well, and after a long journey, he wants to get some water. And he prays to the Lord and he says, Lord, here I am. Give me a sign. Let me know that I am according to your will. I'm prospering in the way that you have provided for me. Give me a sign. How about, and he suggests a sign, how about when I am here and a young lady comes and offers to give me, I'll ask for a drink, and if she offers to give my camels also, then I'll know that this is her. So, indeed, there he is. Rebecca comes down, a beautiful young woman, and she sees him. He asks for some water, and she immediately says, and may I also give your camels water also. He asks, who are you? And she says, I am Rebecca, the daughter of, and she names her genealogy up to Abraham's brother, Nahor. So she's the granddaughter of Abraham's relatives. So she would be Isaac's second cousin, and that's not that unusual. He was looking. Abraham was looking to find a wife from the family. So he immediately slaps on some bracelets, some earrings, gives her some gifts, and she runs back to her parents and tells her mother and her father and her brother Laban about this man who's come. And Laban runs and brings the servant in. He tells the whole story over again. And they say, well, we can't say whether this is from God or not. Only you can say that. It sounds like it's from God. You want a wife for your servant's son? Let's ask Rebecca. Will you go with this man? It's an important question, isn't it? She's grown up her whole life in this home with these people, doing what she does. And this man she's never met before, from a land far away, she's probably never going to return to her homeland. They don't travel back and forth like we do, over a couple hundred kilometers, no big deal for us in many ways. Will you go with this man? Got a good life here. Her parents, her family was not poor. They were okay. They weren't struggling. But this servant is obviously very wealthy. Lots of camels, giving her gifts right away. Was she just attracted to him because she thought maybe she'd have a much better life with this man and his master and his master's son? Doesn't say that about her at all. Now, In the Lord's developmental stages, what we're talking about is our very deep secrets, very deep arcana. You know, we have this 12-volume set called the Arcana Celestia, filled with the secrets of heaven, which the angels just love hearing and knowing about, that tell them about their God, tell them about how this boy became a man, became a divine being, became the fully divine being that we bow down and worship, this man who is fully glorified as the divine human. And the process by which the Lord changed from being a baby to becoming the divine human itself is outlined in these stories in the internal sense. This, of course, is nothing new for any of you. You've been hearing about the internal sense. What perhaps becomes difficult is when we have these phrases being repeated: divine good, divine truth, divine rational truth, the affection of divine rational truth, the affection of divine natural truth, divine natural truth. It can become so overwhelming. And you know, there's no test at the end if you can memorize all these things and be able to say them all back and get all the proper order. It's not that that's so important. Will you go with this man? Will we go with this man? We're all asked to become betrothed or in a betrothal state or a married state to the divine human, to the God of the heavens, to the glorified God of the new church, the gift of the teachings of the new Advent. Will we go along the way? Will we take the journey to a heavenly place and leave the place of our nativity? Will we do Rebecca's journey? Journeys are, they're all over the place in the Old Testament, right? They're always making a trip somewhere. Going from the Holy Land to Egypt, going from Egypt back to the Holy Land, going to the north part of the Holy Land, the south part of the Holy Land, going back to Padan Aram, a lot of travel, all of them representing progressions of our state, progressions. The Lord is drawing us to a new state, and sometimes it appears drawing us back to an old state that we can return to now with a new loves or new truth. Will you go with this man? The marriage of good and truth. Common source of humor amongst new church families when you ask what was the sermon about after you have finished church, and you just tell your parents it was about good and truth. We all know it's about good and truth, right? So you can't get it wrong if you say, what was the sermon about? It was about good and truth. What level of good and truth? Or good and truth where? The Lord is implanting good and truth in all of us. Abraham and Sarah stand for that interior divine good and truth. And we're told we can't even comprehend. We can hardly begin to comprehend what Sarah stands for in terms of intellectual truth. We can maybe understand Abraham represents this divine interior good, but we can't comprehend the truth that comes with it. But out of that is born within us an ability to begin to become human. The divine rational, the Lord's gifting of us to actually begin to see who the Lord is, how the Lord loves us, how the Lord wants to take care of us, how the Word is set up to provide for our every need, how heaven is a gift from the divine to take care of everything we need. We need to come into this more and more and more. The best illustration for this being taken care of by the Lord is what's found in the idyllic image of marriage. I say idyllic because none of us have lived an idyllic marriage. We might have better states of marriage than some days, some months, some years. We may be married and not feeling great about our marriage. We may be married and just thinking it's going to get better and better, and it might be, and it has been. It's hard for any individual to look at any other individual and know what their marriage is like. It's hard for us to look at our own marriage and know exactly what's going on. But the ideal marriage of one man and one woman coming together with the ideas of what is divine and spiritual held in communion together, held commonly as their highest goals and their highest ideals, that they want to come together and they want to become a useful unit of society in the name of the Lord God, Jesus Christ, the one God that they see together, and that they want to have these various things related to heaven, the church, the word, that those are the idyllic things. Who gets that? Who gets to have that? You get married, and perhaps when you got married, you thought, I have all of that. Isn't that great? And then you stay married for a few more years, and you realize, oh my goodness, do my partner and I differ on these more important levels and these not so important levels? And having studied marriage therapy and marriage counseling, and having studied people who have studied it, there are typical patterns that take place throughout marriages. And the worst thing for marriages is contempt, ridicule, criticism, a negative attitude, all the things the writings tell us about in conjugal love. You can't truly love your partner unless you make them your friend and treat them like a friend, that you respect them and love them and give them freedom to become who they can be. You love them for who they are, not who you want them to be. And you love the Lord loving them, and you trust the Lord is going to give you every state you need in order for you to be the best partner you can be. You trust the Lord to allow you to be the best partner you can be. You say, yes, I will follow this man. Now, that's not to be taken gender related to males and females right now. You say, yes, I will follow the path of this divine human that's giving me marriage to the best of my ability to receive it. So, spiritual life and spiritual progress are depicted in the marriage story, and especially in Isaac and Rebekah. Rebekah stands for the affection we have for natural truths that are divinely inspired. The affection we have for just the literal sense of the word. And Isaac stands for that interior divine love that is within the interiors of the word, divine good and divine truth. What's the sermon about? Oh, the marriage of good and truth. Can't go wrong. In each of our lives, in each of our states, we need to come to this state represented by the betrothal. By the leaving of the natural state, she left her home to follow this man to find her husband. We are continually seeking new spiritual goods and truths to be married to have unified within our minds. And the Lord only can make that union. There simply isn't enough time every Sunday morning to really give any of these subjects their proper attention. This sermon could be 3 times as long. I'm going to stop it pretty soon now. But this whole chapter 24, it ends with this beautiful image. Here's this young woman. She's left her home. Yes, she's taken her nursemaid or her servant, and she's not completely alone, but she's pretty much gone hundreds of kilometers from her home, and she's approaching now the place where she's going to spend the rest of her life. She's on the camel, and the camel represents these natural understanding, the natural things we have, the scientifics, the literal sense of the word. She's on the camel. She's representing that we're all moving along based upon what we already know and what we have. And she sees this man walking towards them. She doesn't know who it is, although in the literal sense of the New King James Version, it sounds as if she knows who it is. It sounds as if the servant tells her, while she's still on the camel that it's Isaac. But that's not true. She's yearning. She sees the man walking towards them. She comes down off the camel, and she then asks the servant, "Who is approaching?" Of all the people on earth, could it be her future husband? I guess, right? Has she seen nobody else on the whole journey? Of course not. But she's yearning. She's desiring. She represents our yearning and our desire for the Lord to give us what we need for our next state in life, to prepare us for what we need to hear and know, what we need to begin to love and understand, to sustain us as we make progress in our spiritual lives. Who's this man? That is my Lord, Isaac, my servant's son. She covers herself with the veil. Isaac is out wandering in the fields, it said, in the evening time, and we're told that that is actually a phrase to stand for a young man thinking about his future wife. Out wandering in the field, meditating. He shall meditate upon the word day and night, it says in Psalm 1. To meditate, to think, what is the Lord bringing you into? How are you doing in your state of life in the church? Young men, or the state of young men in us, needs to continually see how we're doing. How are we doing? And what do I really want for the next state in my life? He comes towards them. She comes down off the camel, then she finds out who it is, then she covers herself, and then he takes her. Takes her to the tent of his mother Sarah, and she becomes a wife for him. And he is comforted after the death of his mother. That tent is a tabernacle. That's what a tabernacle is, it's a tent. That tent, the tents were their place of home, but their place of worship. It says it stands for the sanctity of truth. It stands for the same thing as in the tabernacle, the Holy of Holies, that sanctity where the most precious things are. And when we learn in the new church that conjugal love is the repository of the Christian religion, the foundational love of all loves that we can receive as angels and as people on earth, conjugal love is the repository of the Christian religion. It's the sanctity, it's the sanctuary, it's the ark. It's the place where the Lord can be most closely with us as we are most closely with another human being. He brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he was comforted after the death of his mother. Will we follow that man? Will we follow what the Lord has shown us to leave something of ourselves, to go into a new state, to find and be closer to the Lord? Rebekah said yes. Isaac, out wandering the field, sees them and approaches. He's betrothed then to her. They come together, and they stand for the Lord providing for a new state. Of course, there's a whole more bunch of stories that come out of this. The story of the twins that are conceived. Rebekah has Jacob and Esau, and then all the rest of those things that stand for the Lord's developing mind. For ourselves, the Lord is asking us to follow the truth, to know the things of the Word, to follow the best that we can, those true things, and He will provide us with all the goods and truths for the following states. Trust in the Lord. And when the Lord gives you an inkling that you need to follow Him, follow the man. Amen.